What is up, everybody? Tori McElhaney, Terrin, Waack, and Amna, Subhan here. We are coming to you, 24 hours post Raheem Morris introductory press conference? I know you're really big on time.
We're 9 minutes past 24 hours from the start of the press conference.
Okay, we were really
1 hour, 9 minutes.
We're really close, but we're
no, not that. 1 day and 9 minutes.
There you go.
He started.
Okay. So now that everybody has the timing of when this is being recorded, we're coming off of this press conference where Raheem Morris was officially introduced as the Atlanta Falcons head coach. And it's coming about, 10, 11 days after the news initially hit. And what they've been doing, I guess, is building a staff out. That's been the main point of the last 10 days. And this is really the first time that we've had a chance to talk to not only Raheem Morris in this role, but also first time that we've had the chance to talk to Terry since the season ended, since parting ways with Arthur Smith. So it really did feel like this was day one of something new. I kind of want to just start off getting y'all's initial reaction to the press conference as a whole. What when you were in there, when you were listening to Raheem and Terry and Greg Beadles, the team president, what were the vibes like? Were the vibes high is what I'm curious about.
Immaculate.
Immaculate vibes.
I don't know if I go that far.
Raheem did say when he sat down, he was like, this seems like a tight group. Y'all got to loosen up a little bit.
Yeah. But I think that's what stuck out to me most is it didn't seem like this was a new guy.
Yeah.
Because, he is back. He was here for 6 years, back a few years ago. The years themselves are escaping my mind. What was it? 2000?
He was here until 2020.
Yeah, so 2020 minus 6 years is when he started.
2015 was when he got here.
I feel like all the numbers are just running through my mind at once when I think about all the different people that were interviewed. But it didn't feel like, hey, this is a new guy. You need to meet him. He was naming people left and right in the crowd. He knew you from when you worked here in 2020, and he was here. Did not know me, but that's okay. He will now.
he now knows you.
And I think that's something that'll help when there are so many, and we'll get into the staff, I'm sure.
Right.
When there are so many returning staff members from last year already, that it's not like there's this brand new guy who's going to come shake things up. It just feels like a continuation with a new front face.
Yeah, kind of a new energy inserted into...
Oh, he had energy.
Right. Oh, yeah. I don't think he stopped smiling the entire time. We were...
It was contagious.
It was.
I was like, oh, stop.
Yeah. It was that infectious energy that I felt like everybody always talks about with Raheem. And it was something that even when I was covering the team in 2020, you could feel it through a Zoom call. Because that was when COVID protocols were a thing. COVID was a thing. The pandemic was in full swing. And you could feel that energy, I think, through that screen. And seeing him in person, it was the person who I saw through a Zoom call, through a Teams call, was the exact same person who was sitting up there at that podium. And whether or not we were, I think, in a press conference scenario, you had a one-on-one walk and talk with him.
I ran into a Gatorade bin.
She did do that. It's fine. She's fine. Don't worry. But he was the same guy regardless of where we were. And I think that is something that doesn't always happen when you have that many eyes on you. And I thought that was pretty refreshing to see.
He talked a lot about coming home.
Yeah.
And he's a New Jersey native, but he feels like Atlanta is home. And while,
Two of his kids were born here.
Yeah.
So.
And while this is a returning thing, it definitely felt like a fresh start and a new page in this organization.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it's funny too that you talk about coming home, because that was such a big talking point of all day yesterday. The whole entire day he was talking about this whole idea of coming home. And he's right. He said this on the plane on the way here that not often in the NFL do you get the opportunity as a coach to come home or to go back to a place where you were, especially so recent. That's what's so crazy about all of this is we're talking about recent history that he was here, not years and years ago. This happened within 3 years. So the fact that he can kind of tell you about the moments of the history that really spoke to him. I mean, Amna, there was a story that you wrote after the press conference ended, and I thought that it was one of those stories that we could have overlooked these comments that he made about how impactful the Super Bowl loss at the end of the 2016 year into 2017, how that impacted him. We could have looked over that.
I'm sure some people would have.
And I'm sure some people would have.
heard it. I heard you on Twitter.
Right, yeah. We know we don't want to talk about it, but I thought that it actually was very profound the way that Raheem Morris kind of looked the elephant in the room up and down and was like, I'm gonna welcome it in, because it was the 7-year anniversary of that Super Bowl loss. And I think a lot of people could have just bypassed that, but he actually made a point to talk about it. And Amna, I kind of wanted, since you wrote the story, I kind of wanted you to lay that out.
Oh, yeah. And I love a good parallel moment, like full circle moment. Right. Like I was like, it is February 5th. Yeah. Like this time 7 years ago, maybe not this time exactly, Terrin, I know.
Now we're weird at times.
But like.
I am sure it was at night.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So, but for him, like he said that that's the loss that stuck with him the most. It stung the most in his, entire career that dates back to like 98 when the Falcons were, in their first Super Bowl.
Right.
But he's ready to get redemption. And I love that attitude and like just wanting to change that narrative. And
yeah. That was something that I think when I was listening to him talk, he was using, obviously the buzzwords of like, we want to change the narrative and using the word like redemption, but it was something that even in using kind of those buzzwords, it was something that I genuinely felt.
Yeah, it felt very personal for him.
Right, yeah.
And therefore it kind of took that next step forward from just like, saying it front facing, like, right. Of course we want to, win now and we want to win championships.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, because I think I said this on the radio or some other podcast. I can't remember where I said
Probs
this.
Just to me.
Probs, yeah, also probably just to Terrin. They're in the car or something. So what I found so interesting is that I actually think that this was a smart move by Raheem to bring this up, because it shows the fans that he can relate to them. Like, this is someone who's like, I know your pain because I was on that field. We've gone through some stuff together. To a certain extent, we're trauma bonded. Let's be honest. Like, that was not fun. It was not a fun time for the organization. So him sitting there being like, it hurt me, like to my core, to the point where it's like, I have to come back here and do something better for this organization. I want to be a part of better for this organization.
And he knows how to do that now. I mean, like, he won obviously in Tampa Bay, but like as the defensive coordinator, he went to LA, he learned some lessons, and he's ready to bring it here to Atlanta.
Yeah. So it's interesting too, because we're talking about this whole energy shift with him. We're talking about how he connects to the fan base. But Terrin, I'm really curious to know your point of view, like from the points of being able to pull what Terry Fontenot said about the interview process. This is an interview process that we know is pretty extensive, 14 interviews or 14 candidates over the course of 18 days, 18 interviews. What did you get from, or what could you glean from what Terry Fontenot said, one, about the interview process and how they eventually landed on Raheem?
So this story is to come. But one thing that really stood out to me and is why I wanted to write about it was both Greg Beadles and
Terry Fontenot.
They were both saying how like they really appreciated Raheem's transparency when it came to like, I wasn't the best head coach back in the day. I have learned so much since those days, and this is what I've learned. They're like, he was vulnerable about it, and he expressed in those interviews, and they saw a change in him, how he can now be better, how he isn't the same guy in 2020, or how he isn't the same guy when he was with Tampa Bay. And that really stuck with them. And they said his energy was contagious, which we've already talked about. So it'll be interesting to see if he can back those words up.
Right.
Because obviously results speak louder than anything else.
Yeah, and he even said, like, what was the quote where he was like, you can only say, you can't.
I'm going to show you.
Yeah, you can say it, but the only way people believe you is if you show it.
Yeah.
If there's actual physical evidence.
So he's aware. Like,
right.
There's pressure in that regard to show you aren't the same person you were in 2020 when you were in Tampa Bay, because there have been a lot of learning moments. Because that was a fair question to ask. Like, what is the difference between now and then?
Yeah.
The Falcons didn't hire him as a head coach back in 2021 after he was the interim. Why is that? Why is now the right time? But they stood by it because he has changed. And you can grow through those lessons and see how it plays out now. I think it's a partial risk, but I do believe in second chances.
Love a good second chance.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting that he went to the Rams, and he was 32 when he got that job in Tampa Bay. That's really young.
Yeah.
Sean McVay was 31. So he was able to see how a guy did it. And he talked about how he felt jealous of the relationship between Les Snead and Sean McVay. And you can kind of, I don't know exactly what that dynamic looks like, but
that's what he wants with Terry.
Yeah, and you can see it building. Like, they look like they're having fun, just like in 2 days together.
That was a huge takeaway. Those two were broing out.
They really were.
They were
best friends.
Like, shout out to our social team. They have like a law ad meme, which was great.
I saw that and I was like, guys, are we really going to post this?
That's funny. I hope everybody else gets to see that soon. Something that I really thought was interesting about the interview process and everything like that was we haven't heard from Terry Fontenot. I made mention of that earlier. We hadn't heard from Terry Fontenot to this point, but he was the one that was leading all of these interviews. And I thought that what he was talking about, I think he even said, like, when we were talking to Raheem, like, we felt like that this is who we need. Mm-hmm. And I think to have your general manager and then your whole search committee, the group of people that ultimately helped Arthur Blank to this decision, to me, I think you're having Terry Fontenot say that, it means a lot, because that is a relationship that is very, very important. The general manager and head coach relationship, I mean, they get 50-50 and they're reporting straight to Arthur Blank. Like, that relationship has to be on the same level.
And I don't think they wanted to change that, so I think that's why Terry Fontenot, I got it. I kept wanting to say Fontenot, but it's not that. The T is silent, unlike in Terrin.
Yeah.
But, nonetheless.
The T is silent, unlike in
Now
Terrin.
I am silent.
Right, yeah, no.
Because now that they made it clear Terry and Raheem will be reporting to Arthur, you needed Terry's input to maybe matter the most when it came to the collaboration.
That's who he's going to be working outside of the coaching staff. Like,
that dynamic has to be golden. They got to be the bros. They got to be the besties.
Right.
Did we just become best friends? They did.
They did.
They really did.
And
on January 25th.
Right, and it kind of feels that way too, seeing them interact together. Something that came up that I do feel like we need to talk about is the quarterback. And here's what I'll say about this. You knew it was going to be a question. Multiple questions, because that, outside of who is going to be the head coach, who's going to be the starting quarterback in 2024, is the biggest question that the Falcons have to answer this offseason, bar none. So that was, of course, going to be a question. And I thought it was interesting that Raheem answered it like, we have had conversations, but those have been kind of preliminary conversations. They've been brief. They've been in passing.
He hit that minimize button.
He did. He was like,
whoa,
fine. And so it really was like, we're going to explore every avenue. It was interesting because I was also seeing some things on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. There were some people saying, like, do they not have a plan at quarterback? Yes. Like, they have a plan. I think that response was less about, they haven't talked about it, they don't have a plan, like, the combine's coming up, like, I think it's
I feel.
It's less about, we're just running on caffeine at this point, you guys. It's less about that, and I think it's more about them holding the cards close to their chest. They have a plan. You cannot tell me that they have not talked about that.
But I also think it's fair that he was prioritizing his staff. Because if they keep preaching this collaboration,
right,
then you have to prioritize getting the people who are going to help make that decision together in a room, and then they can make it. Like, yes, they have the plan, but you don't have the people necessary in place to completely execute it yet. So I do believe that, it's been a conversation, but it's more so been in passing until we have everyone we need. And I don't think they're done hiring. The way he was like, we're almost there. I was like, no, no, I want to turn my phone off.
It's like, we want to have a weekend. No, we don't have
But I don't think they're done. And you know what's coming up? The Super Bowl.
I know, No, good point. I think, too,
Thanks.
that like, when I think about the way that they answered any questions about the quarterback, I thought it was interesting that Raheem made the point that to say, like, Atlanta knows what success looks like at the quarterback position, or not success, but knows, like,
what it wants
at a high level.
Like, using kind of those words, I was really intrigued by the use. I often, like, care a lot about what people say, as I'm sure we all do, being journalists, but that was really interesting when he was like, Atlanta knows what it's like to see quarterbacking on a high level. And he made quarterbacking. Yeah. He made reference to Matt Ryan, of course. And then he brought up Matthew Stafford with the Rams, who he's seen in action for the last 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm. And we heard him talk about wanting an elite processor, a good decision maker, who's not going to turn over the ball, who's going to also, like he said, cut it loose and play ball. So someone who can, balance the two things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that obviously that's what you hope any quarterback, like that's to be like the bare minimum, to be able to do those things. And so I really do think, especially if you want to be successful, but this is the biggest question that they have.
We know where his priorities lie right now, considering when he said what he was most excited about, he goes Drake London, Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a quarterback question mark in the back of his line of who's going to be distributing the ball to those two.
Yeah, no, it matters. And, to kind of look forward, and they didn't give us anything in that press conference, whether it's like, they're like, oh, we could go get a quarterback through the draft or free agency or a trade. Like, all avenues are open. No. And it's like, okay.
But it's always good to have that flexibility because they can do what they want in either regard.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so let's move this forward. The Falcons have their head coach.
Bless.
They are building out their staff. It's nearly complete. So what's next for this team? We have Combine.
Back to the quarterback.
I know, right? Honestly, we have Combine coming up at the end of February. We have Pro Days coming up in March. The new league year starts March 13th. The free agency window opens up, and it kind of feels like we're finally to the point where it's like we're through all the hectic nature of a coaching search, and finally they can zero in on actually building out this team and completing this team, because they do already have so many key pieces in place that I think even when I look at this roster, it's like they should be. I'll say it. The record should have been better this year.
Yes.
Like, Raheem Morris said, like, we got to win the South. Like, that's literally, he's like, that is a goal. He's like, I don't want to put any quantitative goals, but a goal is to win the NFC South. And that was a goal last year. That's something that when you looked at the NFC South last year going into the season, you're like, well, this should be the Falcons. Like, if they can produce, if they can score points, if the defense can have an uptick, which the defense did, all of those things going into it, you felt pretty good about it, and that's not what happened. And so, they're setting this goal and this expectation now in February, and it needs to be reached. Right. And so how do they get there? What is next for this team in y'all's mind?
I feel like with the Combine coming up and Pro Days rapidly approaching, you start looking at the newcomers first before looking in free agency, because I think they know a bit about what the market might look like. I feel like last year it was
well,
all the balls were out on the court.
Everything, right? Yeah, everything.
A lot of quarterbacks last year.
Yeah, the way that the scouting cycle works, like even in free agency, like they've known for a year who's going to be available next year.
Yeah,
and I think they already have. I probably know they already have multiple targets of who they want to go get.
And so with Pro Days and the Combine, they can get a better look at the youngsters.
Right. And then you make a good point, because they actually are having their February meetings with the whole college scouting department. Literally, as we speak, it's happening.
We got to go find that room.
Right. Yeah, no. And so those are the things that are actively happening right now. So you're kind of getting into the mindset of away from a coaching search and into all right, here, let's look at these college guys coming up.
The Senior Bowl just happened, so there was a look at a few guys there.
That's what's so crazy about all this. The Senior Bowl has been a hotbed for this scouting department to draft players who they have made good connections at the Senior Bowl. We haven't even talked about the Senior Bowl.
More than 50% of the past 3 draft classes came from the Senior Bowl.
Right. And that just goes to show you how all-encompassing this coaching search was, how all-encompassing getting the assistants are. We're going to have the chance to talk to the coordinators probably coming up in the next week or so. There's a lot that was happening. But also while all this is happening, there's a ton of stuff happening behind the scenes in terms of just getting ready for the Combine, getting ready for Pro Days, Senior Bowl, free agency. All that's coming up very, very soon. And it's going to be honest before we even know it.
Yeah. It's going to be what?
Honest. like running
on
upon
us.
us.
Yeah.
I thought you said honest, and I was like, do you mean August?
No. On us.
Well, going back to even the press conference with Arthur Blank and Rich McKay, like they felt like they were so close and that the time is to win now. And they have their first check, right? They have the head coach. And there's a lot of talk about vision. I mean, there was a great quote. What was it? It's a mentality before it's ever a reality. Like that was the buzziest of the buzzy.
Yeah.
But I loved it because like at this point in February, like that's the like
nothing
for lack of a better word, mentality that you have to have until you can go and execute it.
Right.
And now they have the chance to do that.
It's not reality until it's August.
Good point. Yeah. Or September when the season starts.
I was thinking training camp.
Well.
Preseason matters, Tori.
Yep. And that's such a great note to end on because y'all don't want to get into my preseason takes. So thank you guys so much for just going over this press conference. You know, like that was a lot yesterday. I think we worked a lot. We put in a lot of hours. But in the end, I thought it was pretty fun. I thought it was pretty fun for the fan base to get to see Raheem Morris in action in all of his like smiling glory, if you will.
I'm excited to work with him, work around him.
Yeah.
You know, like weekly press conferences and whatnot.
Yeah.
See what he's like. Watch it flip. Goes into like robot mode.
No, don't even put that out in the universe.
I don't think he has
not with
a
that
robot
smile.
mode.
Right, yeah. No, definitely not. All right, thank you guys so much for joining us. You can catch all of our podcasts, which there will be so many podcasts. We have so many checkpoints that we need to talk to you guys through, and I'm really excited to do that. So check us out, the Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pod, wherever you get your podcast, and we will see you again real soon.